here, boss!
Hello. In this video, I'd like to show you how to make some sweet Orcs infantry using the Boys kit, but not to make boys this time. I've talked a few different times about how the Boys kit is the kind of Pandora's box of Orcs infantry. You can use it to make pretty much any other kind of unit as long as it doesn't get too much bigger or meaner like knobs or bosses. This time, I want to show you how to make Storm Boys. Storm Boys are a staple in a lot of Orcs armies because they're one of our two units that can deep strike alongside the Death Copters. Compared to the Copters, they're a lot less durable, and they don't have much firepower, but their smaller footprint lets them sneak into the battlefield more easily. They're a lot cheaper in points, and because they're infantry, they can zip straight through walls. This makes them very useful for scoring secondary missions or screening out areas at the start of the game with their deep strike that we don't want our opponents using their own deep strikes to get into. Conveniently, Storm Boys are really just boys with rocket packs, so we don't need to go looking for too many extra gubbins when we build our boys. The main secret to making them into Storm Boys is in their posing. There are 3 little methods for reposing your Storm Boys that I'd like to show you today. I've got some examples off screen. You'll notice there are 7 here, 6 boys and a knob. We're going to be building 2 more Storm Boys and another Storm Boy boss knob, and then we'll have 2 squads of 5. Let's begin. I've got a boy prepared here. He's not yet glued. I've used blue tack so that we can repose him as we go. Now, the difference between a boy and a Storm Boy really is just a rocket on the back. Now, you can use whatever kind of rockets you like that you think are a good size. This is a rocket from the Orcs Boys kit. It comes off of the end of the rocket launcher. I've got another one here for this lad. But you can use different kinds of rockets as well. These rockets here come from some Astra Militarum kit. I got them in a second-hand bit slot, and I've used them for rocket packs. It's the same one that gave me what I believe is a hunter-killer missile from some other kind of Imperial vehicle that I've stuck on the boss knob. So go rummaging around for different kinds of rockets in your bits box. Rocket launchers, combi weapons, stuff from other factions. If it looks like it could take an Orc off the ground in a massive cloud of black smoke, you're good to go. Let's nab this rocket and clean up this little bit of wire that was connecting it to the rest of the launcher. Now don't throw away the rest of the launcher either. You can stick something else on this and make it a totally different kind of gun. As always, bits are very important for Orcs. Because I like to scrape every mold line and drill every gun barrel, I'm also going to put a little hole at the bottom of this rocket. There we go. Now, the main cut that we make when we're building Storm Boys is across the legs, right here. Do you see this bit? Where the leg kind of meets the lower torso area? Imagine the Orc is wearing underpants. You want to cut kind of along that line. That's how we're going to repose for 2 of our different kinds of poses. The first one is Big Steppy. This pose implies some kind of forward motion. Maybe the Storm Boys have just landed and they're still catching themselves from the momentum of their launch. Or they're getting ready to take off and they've got their leg arched out in preparation for that. You can see Big Steppy is cutting the leg and then rotating it upwards and forwards. The alternative is the Running Man. If you take the leg where you've cut it and then twist it backwards, your Orc's leg will stick out behind it, and it'll make it look like it's running. Again, maybe he's carried through some momentum from a previous jump, or he's getting ready to go take off. And you can do some pretty silly things with how you pose these. Just be careful that you don't cut too deep and close, or else the angle of rotation will look a bit unnatural. This boy's leg kind of flukes off to the side in a weird way, as if he was doing some kind of tap dance routine. This one, I've cut a little further down the leg, about here, just above that belt, and that's given him a slightly more natural angle of rotation for the rest of his leg to stick out at. I'd like to highlight this silly little lad as well. He's doing Big Steppy, but his whole body is tilted the other direction, so it kind of looks like he's just started to take off, and then his boss has told him not to take off, and he's looking over like, aye? Wah! Alright, I've brought you in for a closer look while we do a little bit of Orc leg surgery here. Now, I like to use a pretty large knife that I'm not going to use for much else. This is my big chunky hobby knife end that's broken off. I use this for things like cutting sections of milliput, or going through big chunks of models where I need some kind of strong leverage, where I don't mind if the blade becomes blunt or if I damage the handle. As you can see, there is no handle to damage. So we're going to take one of these legs. I'm going to choose this one back here. Just be mindful of where your connection points are if you've got flat feet or arched heels when you're cutting these. I'm going to try and keep my fingers out of the way so you can see what we're doing here. I'll make this cut right above the leg belt. Not the belt, this little strap here on the thigh. We start just by scoring it. Press in. And then you can start scoring it in different spots along that same line around the length of the leg. In this case, it's going to be right along this little thigh belt that we can use to guide our knife. Not all of the orcs will have these, and you might not always want to do it on this spot for the ones that do. So just be mindful of where your rotation point is. There we go. Once we're a little more certain of where we want to cut, we can really knuckle in. You might not be able to see this well because my hand's going to be directly above the model. Get it steady, hold it flat, and really just beat the devil out of it. Might take you a few minutes of pressing and sawing to get through the plastic, because these legs are surprisingly tough chunks. If you have a hobby saw, this is a good time for it. I do not. But we're still able to make a good cut. Now you can see where the leg is separated and where the leg still attaches. After that, just rotate it through and see where it still connects in a way that looks natural. You don't want to have too much random inorganic overhang from the connection point. So this is a good spot. If we want to have him look like he's running, we can just hold it like this. Let's use a little blue tack so I can move my hands away and you can see what I'm actually doing. If you put the leg like this, congratulations, you've just recreated what it was before we've cut it off. But we can also have the leg backwards like this if we want him running. We can have the leg arced up forwards for him taking a funny step in one direction. You really twist it all the way around, you can have it look completely unnatural. And then if you adjust it just a little further from there, we get back to a more realistic running pose. Now check this with where you want to put the torso, and how low to the ground your base is, especially if you're using any custom basing materials. For now, I'm going to glue this orc into his running pose, and we'll construct the rest of the Stormboy accordingly. If you're a little more generous than usual with your glue while you're sticking the legs together, you should be able to smooth out any slightly rougher edges where the 2 points come back together. Now we're ready to add the rest of the Stormboy. When you build a running lad, you can tilt their torso a little further forwards to give them a sense of real barreling momentum. Just make sure you don't tilt them too forwards or they'll end up looking like they're staring at the ground, and you'll get these weird gaps around the ball joint. If you press them further back and upright, it implies more of a landing motion. Again, just think about the kind of motion and momentum you'd like to imply with these poses. The sense of dynamism, apart from the rockets on their backs, is what really sells them as Stormboys. Gonna have a look at my other two running guys as a reference to see where I'd like mine to be running. This guy's running and looking to the left. Maybe I'll have this guy running and looking to the right. Tilt his body down a bit, pivot him to the right, pivot the head. He can be making a big turn after he's landed after a jump. Or maybe he's getting a run up to go hit a key flank area that his boss has indicated. Also keep in mind when you're posing your models, how far you can rotate the limbs. We'll have something on their back which is not so important, but the different position of the legs can be trouble for when we're posing our arms. If you've got a leg kicking up in front, it might be hard for your lad to hold their weapon particularly low, because it'll bump into their knee that wouldn't normally be there. With this boy, I'm able to keep the limbs pretty well clear of the leg, even as we rotate the arm with the sword backwards. We've got an orc boy on the run,
Storm Boys is ready for a fight.
With these extra outstretched limbs, just be sure that you're still keeping most of the model over its base when you attach it. I've got a little bit of overhang from the sword and the leg, but he's not kicking out enormously so I'm pretty comfortable with where he's sitting right now. And there we have a completed Storm Boy, made out of the regular Orc Boys kit. He looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with how he turned out. Now, that's how we can do the poses for a running Orc or a stepping Orc. But I want to show you how to do an even cooler one, in my opinion. This is an Orc that's making a crash landing, or just beginning to launch off into combat with his rocket pack. This one is actually even simpler than the last option. Sometimes you won't even need to do any cutting of the legs. All we need is to use the natural angle of some of the Orc's feet that you'll find in the kit. Here's another one of our blue tacked demonstration models. I'll take off his legs so that you can see his feet. Look at this. See how his heel is raised? The heel that's raised is still flat, like where you would put the rest of his foot. That means if you use this part as your connection point to the base instead of the toe of the foot, you get a pose where the boy is launching backwards. This is great for creating a sense of momentum either inwards, as if the boy is making a big stomp attack from the sky, or if he's kicking backwards and unloading his slugger into some gits that are a little too close for comfort, if such a thing can happen for Orcs. Let's start building this lad. When we glue the torso to the legs, we can try and encourage a slightly more upright posture than normal, because we want to tilt it backwards and inwards, so that when our boy is standing on an angle, he looks a little bit more upright than usual. If we curl it in like this, our boy will look like he's being flung backwards completely out of control, which might be what you want for your lads, but I want mine to look like they're slightly more disciplined. Conveniently, Orc Boys already are meant to be able to take a bunch of items on their back, like the little stick bomb pack, things for the heavy weapons squad. This makes it really good real estate, slapping some rockets on when you're making Storm Boys.
It's free real estate.
This lad's looking pretty good now, but what really sells the effect is once he's on his base, so I'll get him glued on and you'll see what I mean about the backwards kicking motion. This part of the process can be a little fiddly, because we're attaching it to a much smaller point than usual. A little glue and patience should be able to get us there. If you really want some stability, you can also use the heel of the other one on the ground to really make a kind of striking stomp motion. There's this great passage in The Infinite and the Divine where they're talking about a Storm Boy who launches out of the sky and then comes boots first down on the enemy, ready to stomp on them. I love that bit. And I think these poses are a great way to capture some of that energy. And the glue's now settled enough that I can show you what I mean. See how he's kind of stomping in? If you look at him from the side, you get a really good sense of the motion. So that's how you make these Storm Boys that look like they're at the very beginning or the very end of a launch. That's 3 easy poses for your Storm Boys. Now we're going to make the boss knob for one of these groups. And if you were using the knobs from the boys kit, you'll be able to do the exact same thing when you're working on the legs separately, rotate them, and then you pose them as you see fit. I would like to note, since that spiky shoed knob pair of legs in that kit has a little cloth, this guy had a cloth too. I had to trim it down so they wouldn't have some conflicting motion here. It's implied by the pose that the boy is moving this way, but the cloth would have been flowing in this direction to kind of contradict that. When you've got flowy things on your models, you want to make sure that all the motion is implied to be going the same way. This guy, however, comes from the old Assault on Black Reach kit, where the legs are already stuck together in one piece. So I want to do something a little bit sillier. We've played a lot with the verticality of these, but what if we twist him horizontally? I'm going to try snipping off this leg and using a shooter as a prosthetic for him to balance on. I have no idea if this will work, so you're getting the full live experience. On the smaller orc boys, I wouldn't be using clippers on their legs. Clippers are comparatively quite bulky and we might do a lot of damage to them. This guy, however, doesn't need any of his leg, so I'm going to use my clippers to save time, and if we have a rough spot that we need to glue onto later, we can just sand it down until we have a nicer point of connection. Let's use a little blue tack to test our fits again. See if this will actually work, or if I've just lopped off a perfectly good leg for no reason. Okay, the shooter is extremely long on him, so I might trim it down, maybe just to the barrel. We don't really need a magazine of bullets. And I might cut off the little nozzle at the end as well, so that we have a nicer, flatter connection point to glue them on. Okay, so it looks absolutely ridiculous, but I kind of like it. I'm going to test if I can have him holding out the slugger while he's flying sideways, like the whole Hot Fuzz thing of jumping out in an action movie. Yeah, there we go. This is just the right amount of stupid for me that it becomes cool. Okay, I've reattached the gun casing, so his leg isn't quite as cartoonishly short. I also think it might give us a slightly larger and more reliable connection to his torso so that we can actually stitch this thing on. Et voila! This is pretty precarious, so I'm just going to hold him steady for a little while. Never mind, he's already good. Yeah. I'm not sure I want to hazard tilting him right now. I'll hold him steady. But this is the angle we're working with. Once that's tried a little more, we'll throw in his slugger arm, we'll throw in his rocket, and we'll be all done. Just while there's super glue sets, I'd like to talk a little bit about the process of making these orcs. Part of the reason that these work is because they're still the same size as the Storm Boys models, and they come with all the same equipment. I don't think tournament organizers will say that you're modeling for advantage with these lads, because they're not quite as tall as the original Storm Boy models. They're not standing up and jumping off of small pieces of terrain and tactical rocks and what have you. But I'm going to put on screen a picture of what Storm Boys looked like in 3rd edition. These are still perfectly legal in tournaments. I don't see why these would be any different. Besides, we're getting a lot of height out of things like this huge rocket on this Storm Boy knob, these upraised arms in the jumping pose, or whatever the heck is going on here with Shooter Boot. This feels so precarious. I don't want to rip apart the work we've already done on the leg by mistake. Maybe the main connection point's here between the shoulders. Yeah, talk you through my mistakes while I make them. Like $1 Billion Clown Farm. Now there's an Orcs YouTuber. I can't legally condone everything he does, but gosh dang if he don't make a good video. Pretty good at the game too. Just out of paranoia, I'm going to throw a bunch more glue around the bottom here, just to make it more secure, maybe. I don't know if that's how glue works, but that's how paranoia works. And Shooter Boot is done! Look at this pose. I adore the silliness of this model, and I think it's the same kind of silliness that you'll get through reposing all of these Storm Boys. And there you have it, how to make boys into Storm Boys. Simple, easy, and so much fun. All it takes is a little imagination and some spare parts. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope to see you in the next one after you've tried making some crazy orcs of your own. See you then. Bye bye!
Sod off!